Okay, so we are, everybody, we're ready for our workshops. We're all hooked up technology wise. Excuse me.
Sorry.
Okay. So I'm very excited to introduce Shirley Jump. She was with us several years ago for an all-day Saturday workshop. And as you can see from her banner and from the bookmark she gave out, she is a multiple times best-selling author and the author of a book on writing fiction. And now she has a website that has all kinds of mastermind and YouTube videos and everything you could imagine. So we are really, really lucky to have her here. So thanks, Shirley.
Thank you. And I swear the presentation will be better than this technology disaster. My husband's in IT, so I don't have to be, and I am not a master at this at all, but I definitely know how to teach fiction, so I will do that instead. Thank you all for having me. And yes, I am the author of Writing Compelling Fiction, as well as more than 85 books published in 24 countries. I stopped counting at 85. I think I'll start again like when 95 hits because they're good numbers. I have sold more than 7 million copies of my books all around the world. It's been a nice career, and I've been doing it since I was a baby. So I'm very happy to be here. And why am I hearing myself? Are you guys hearing an echo on the Zoom? I'm hearing myself. Need my laptop. Okay, that's not the microphone, it's just the speaker. Okay, all right, that should be okay, I think. All right, so we're going to talk first about dialogue. And I was thinking, oh, we'll have all this extra time and I'll get to go back over stuff. I don't think so, because I screwed up the technology part. But let's just get right into it. This is how to write more powerful dialogue, which is the first presentation. The second one is about 6 techniques of compelling novels, even though I said 5 in my email to Maggie. I have 6. So there's a lot of things that people are possibly doing wrong with their dialogue. Number 1 is not using it to advance the plot. And arguments do not advance the plot. Anyone who's been in a relationship knows that an argument just makes things worse. It doesn't get anything going along. So this is my my 7th book. So I wrote 10 books in 8 years before I sold my first one. 10. I was a very slow learner. I had been very successful in nonfiction. I'd been on the Wall Street Journal list. I'd then worked for Boston Papers. I'd been very successful. So I was like, this fiction thing will just be a breeze. Not so much. 10 books in 8 years before I sold my first one. And there's a lot of reasons why this particular book was rejected that are not a big surprise to me. So this is a teacher that has come to the father's door. He's like a comic strip guy. I don't even know how he's making a living at that. Anyone who's in the arts industry knows that's probably impossible. But she's screaming at him, and it's like 1st or 2nd grade. Harmless prank, what your Sunday cost my students almost an entire day of learning. We're supposed to go through zoology, blah, blah, blah. And what is he doing? He's all excited about her. He thinks she's hot. And I'm like, that is A, not the time that you're thinking somebody's hot. And B, she's screaming at him, which is already a major red flag. Just if you're out there dating, that's a major red flag, people. And it's not fun. And then he jokes with her. He doesn't get upset or anything. It's just so stupid and bad dialogue. The second thing you are probably not doing is having it be triggered by the plot. This was probably the biggest lesson, well, one of the biggest lessons I ever learned, that everything on the page, every single word on that page has to either impact or be triggered by the plot. There's no empty, wasted words. You don't have time or room for that, particularly with a reading generation that has an 8-second attention span. My YouTube videos, every 8 seconds, something's happening, because my average viewer is between 25 and 45. And although I would probably sit there, well, no, I didn't sit through Dune. I didn't like Dune, but I would sit there a little longer than 8 seconds. Most people are like, come on, come on, come on. I'm just going to scroll on to the next one, because there are like millions and millions of videos on YouTube. So you've got to do the same thing with your book. There are 19, 20 million books on Amazon. How are you going to keep people glued to yours if you're not keeping things triggered by the plot? Because people don't just say crap out of the blue. They don't just come out and go, oh, did you know that's your brother? You know, like, they don't just do that. That is not how life works. And dialogue on a book works very similar to how dialogue works in real life. Not entirely, because there is a plot going on. So Doug, this is a different book that was rejected. He's in the middle of fixing his air conditioner, the air conditioner for his sister. So he's, you know, doing whatever you do to fix an air conditioner. And she's like, hey, why don't you have a girlfriend? And it was just makes no sense. he's fixing her air conditioner. She has absolutely zero motivation for asking him why he doesn't have a girlfriend at the moment when it's 105 degrees in her house. It has nothing to do with the plot at that moment. To be honest, her air conditioner has nothing to do with the plot either. So all of those were unnecessary, as was this entire conversation. The third thing you're probably doing wrong is not making it sound natural. And I see this all the time. So I lead mastermind groups, as Maggie pointed out, which are meet once a month. They're small groups, 10 to 15 people, and I critique pages for 5 of the people in the group each month. So you get that for $50 a month, which is actually a pretty good deal. They don't make it sound natural. They're like, I got to get this information on the page. And in real life, we have pauses, we trail off. We don't just say everything with really big words in general. Like I was just watching an interview with David Letterman, who's an extremely smart guy, and he used some really big words, and he was talking to Jerry Seinfeld, and Jerry's like, what does that mean? Like, normal people don't talk like that. People are not generally stiff and weird when they talk, unless they're weird people, right? So in this is the same book with the comic strip guy. His son has just fallen off the monkey bars and is hospitalized. And they're going in there and he's just like, his eyes are twinkling. He's like, don't you need a handsome guy? And we're going to race to the top. I'm like, your kid is in the hospital. You don't know what's happened to him because he hasn't even seen the kid yet. And they get like on 2 pages. And then he's like, oh yeah, I think, and she's like, I think his room is over here. The dad doesn't even know where the room is. None of this is natural or believable dialogue at that moment in time. The dad men don't talk that much in general. Most men, some do, but most don't. And 99% of them that are parents are not going to be like, hey, she's so sexy, let's race to the top of the building. Like, it makes 0 sense to the book. And not showing enough. So every single word in your book is a potential to show the reader instead of telling them. And telling, I get it, I love telling. My first drafts have a lot of telling in them because it's so easy. But showing is where it really comes alive. Because all dialogue has a purpose on the page. It's not just there for decorations. It's not just there for you to meet your word count. It's there to advance the plot, share about the character, or somehow open up the reader to something else you want to show them in the book. This book was also rejected because Daniel, this is the same guy, he called Abby the heroine who has 0 nursing experience. And he has her come over and he's like, well, you know, I'm supposed to wake him up every hour in case he has a concussion and you should ask him a few questions. And he's like, well, he won't talk to me. So, you know, I'm not gonna wake him up. He's really angry about something. I'm really frustrated. And right there, I have 2 adverbs not really showing right there because that's telling. It's so unlike Tyler not to talk to me. It doesn't sound like a man. It doesn't advance the plot at all. It doesn't show anything about his emotional state and about what's going on with him. It really doesn't. It's just getting her from A to B. You come over, not even a nurse. I'm not going to call the doctor. I'm just going to call his random teacher that yelled at me and have her check on him. And the biggest thing is what I've mentioned 1,000 times, not making it advance the plot, but most of all, the internal plot. The hardest thing for me to learn, and the reason why those books were all crappy and editors were like, no thanks, is because I had no internal plot. I had 0 emotional development for the characters. I just did a video on this and on my channel that I'll show you guys the link later. And I get it, because when you have to write the internal emotional plot, you got to get inside with your own little crap, right? The stuff we all go to therapy for, because you got to kind of touch on that in order to make your characters come alive. Nobody likes therapy. Nobody likes to talk about their feelings. And most of all, nobody likes to think about their feelings. I was talking to somebody on Thursday night when I got here, a friend of mine in Jacksonville, and she wants to write a book. And she's had a very traumatic childhood. And she's like, well, I don't want, you know, my mother to know and recognize her if I do a memoir. Like, I don't want her to recognize herself. And she goes, I think I'll put it in a novel. And she goes, but how can I do that and make the mother the same as mine and not have my mother recognize herself? So you don't have to make the mother the same as yours. You just got to touch on the emotions that chaotic childhood arose in you. My mother was a really bad alcoholic from the time I was 11 on. So I basically raised myself after that and all my younger siblings. I don't talk about alcoholic mothers in all of my books. There's 1 or 2 here and there. There's another alcoholic, like a recovering alcoholic hero. It's not about the alcoholism. It is about the trauma that that leaves me with, that I touch on with my characters, the sense of family, the sense of belonging, safety, security. Addiction makes children feel very unsafe. They don't have that security. They're not sure how their parent will be when they walk in the room, whether their parent will be alive. Like those emotions that I felt when I was a kid, that I did go to therapy for, are the ones that I throw in there for my characters. And that lack of safety, security, that chaos can come from a million different situations. It does not have to come from the exact situation I had as a child. My mother's gone, she's passed away, so she wouldn't read the books anyways. Nobody in my family reads my books, so I'm safe if I wanted to do that. No one would recognize anybody, but I don't. All dialogue, like I said, has a purpose on the page. So here I've got another scene where she's talking to a computer expert for literally no reason. It has nothing to do with the plot. I'm not actually even sure what the plot was here. I don't think I had a plot. And he also thinks she's very hot. So she must have been like a Victoria's Secret model on the side. And he's flirting with her and everything else. And he's like, I hope you'll give me a rain check. And he says, I'll keep your promise in my heart till the next time. The dialogue is so horrendous, so horrendous. But when I was writing this, I thought it was really good. Oh, look, everybody's thinking Abby's really beautiful. There's competition for Daniel, right? Like maybe shouldn't worry about his maybe dying kid and just come flirt with Abby. You know, none of this makes any sense whatsoever and has nothing to do with the plot. It doesn't advance the plot. And most of all, it doesn't show her internal growth. It doesn't really show her fears about maybe she can't operate technology, which obviously I can relate to that. It doesn't do anything in there. It doesn't show a damn thing. So the dialogue should always, always, always be advancing the plot and show the character's internal issues in some way. Well, that's great information to have, Shirley, but how do you do that? Because I've been told that 1,000 times when I was first writing, and I was like, what the hell does that mean? And how do I do that? So first, it has to be triggered by the plot, like I said, like caused by an event or other dialogue in the scene. People don't just randomly start talking. So something happens. Ideally, it is something that has happened in the scene. The plane is crashed. The husband walked out the door. The kid was in the hospital. Some event has triggered these people to speak to each other. And the words have to be motivated in some way for the character to say them. A lot of us, especially more introverted people, don't just start talking for no reason. Like we don't want to talk to people. And even though I'm relatively extroverted, at the end of the day, I have no desire to talk unless I need to give my husband some kind of information or I'm complaining about the soap opera that is For All Mankind, because that's what we're watching right now. And it's very soap opera-y. But I have a motivation for that. Like, hey, do you want to go to dinner with Maria on Friday night? You know, I'm not just randomly talking to him about nothing. Same thing with the characters. Now, this book was a USA Today bestseller. It was an award winner. It was an Amazon bestseller. It was a bestseller multiple times because it was when it was originally out, and it was again when I got my rights back and re-released it. So it obviously did something right. It was actually the second book that I wrote out of the 10 that were rejected. And this scene is the only thing, no, the idea of this scene is the only thing that stayed. So Candace wakes up in a stranger's bedroom a couple weeks before her wedding. That was all I kept from all 75,000 words. Nothing else stayed. So with this dialogue, why it works is that the man, the hero in the scene, sounds like a man, and they're acting while they're doing it. There is motivation for everything they are saying, and her internal plot is becoming clear. This is the very first chapter, so she's not going to be all, you know, gushing her emotions, but you're going to get a hint of them. So I'm sure you're enjoying this little game of cat and mouse, and he's not going to just go on and on and on because he's not. Men just don't do that, right? Her hand darted out for the dress. He whisked it behind his back. And so there's action going on, right? She's trying to leave. She's trying to recover her dignity. And this is actually her. And then she says, but I need to leave. My fiance expected me hours ago. So here's her goal for the scene. This is why she needs her dress. She needs to go. Her fiance thinks she should be home. So external plot right there. And in her head, she has a very tiny bit of an introspection. And the reason why she has a very tiny bit of introspection is that they're talking to each other. When you have a lot of introspection where the character is just thinking and thinking and thinking, and when you read your introspection aloud, I want you to time it and think, how long is that guy standing there looking at her going, How long do you think that would last? Like 5 seconds? You know, a lot of people have like 5 pages of introspection, and you have to realize that what happens in a scene where there are 2 people talking or more than 2 people talking is that the other person's just staring at them thinking, are they mentally unbalanced? Like, why are they just standing there thinking? It's very boring to read because it jars the reader out of the story, because the reader is expecting this action with her trying to get her dress and he's giving her a hard time. And it's very boring, and it slows down your plot because nobody's doing anything. They're just thinking. Now, I'm not saying you don't want narrative in your book. You just got to make sure that the timing works, that you're not doing it in the middle of like a gunfight. I think it was Cheryl St. John that I had gone to a workshop for many, many, many years ago. And she had us all act out a gunfight. So everybody's like, right around the room. And she says, and this is what happens when you have narrative in the beginning. So all the characters are going like this. And then the one character steps back and he thinks, my dear departed Rose, I miss her so much, blah, blah. And he's going on and on about how he met Rose and how much Rose matters to him. And you realize that all the other guys are just standing there like in the middle of a gunfight. So that doesn't work. So you really want to be sure that the balance is good. And so he teases her, do you always do what people expect you to do? And she says, of course. So right there, we have a teeny bit of her internal plot. People that do everything that people expect them to do have a certain type of personality. They have a certain type of history that makes them do that versus a rebel who never does what people say. So she is obviously some kind of a people pleaser for some reason. She asks for the clothes. He comes in, and I forgot to highlight that dialogue, but then he asks her, you've never once done something wild, unexpected, except for last night, of course. And so the whole time they're still acting, they're still moving. She doesn't answer that question. And not answering a question is just as powerful as answering it, because her avoiding that answer tells the reader, so this probably is the first time she's done this, or she has done it before and she's not going to tell him about it. Reader doesn't know yet because we're only on like the 3rd page. And she just kind of does this imperious, if you had a shred of decency, you'd leave me alone. And then he tells her, I wouldn't have a stiff neck from sleeping on the couch at the end. So now he has a teeny tiny little save the cat moment, which is a moment where you want a seemingly bad character to do something nice or something good. It's just a little moment that redeems him because he's been woke up with her. She woke up in the bed. She doesn't have any clothes on. He's keeping her clothes from her, like all of that. You think he's a jerk, but then he redeems himself there. So there's a lot that happens in those few paragraphs, right? A whole lot that goes on. We know her external goal. We know her external motivation. We know what's going on a little bit with her internally. And we know that there is something she's hiding, either from herself or from him. All in one scene. So then you want to make it sound natural. So study the way people talk, how we kind of, wander off or we switch topics. Not exactly like how when I talk to my husband, and I've already had an entire conversation in my head before I open my mouth. And I'm like, yeah, so Thursday will work, right? And he's like, for what? I've already planned out this dinner, people coming over, what I'm going to serve on the menu. And he wasn't privy to that because that was in my head. So, but in general, people talk around what they want to say. They don't just blurt out their feelings. Look at how other people talk. Use the pauses, the drifting off, the interruptions, and no soap opera dialogue. Those of you who are, because now I feel old, but when I was a kid, my mother watched The Young and the Restless and The Bold and the Beautiful and all of those every afternoon. And on Friday, and there's a video on my channel about dialogue where I use this, on Fridays, they would be like, did you know that Jimmy is really your? And then you have to wait till Monday to find out who Jimmy really was. And they would just pause. And there, I pulled a clip from, I think, Guiding Light or All My Children, where somebody does that and put that in my video. And it's hilarious because that's exactly what they do. People don't do that, okay? Unless they're interrupted. Like we were just watching For All Mankind last night, and Danny has a big secret he needs to tell Ed. My husband and I are like, don't tell him, because we know it will destroy Ed's life. And instead, when he's about to tell him, there's an explosion outside the habitat that they're in. So, okay, that makes sense. Like you got interrupted by an explosion. So something like that would make sense for the character to not tell, but just to go, I'm going to tell you that Monday. That doesn't work. It's not how people work. You want to interrupt with actions like I had with that other scene, because that is natural. That is what we're doing. In the video I loaded this week, I said, people do stuff all the time. When I'm having a conversation with somebody, I'm eating, or I'm doing the dishes, or I'm wiping down the countertops. You know, I'm not just usually just standing there for hours on end talking. There's stuff happening. And you don't want the long soliloquies. I remember having to memorize Hamlet's to be or not to be. And I love Hamlet, but that's a really long soliloquy, I gotta say. It was a lot to memorize in English. And I also had to memorize the Gettysburg Address and deliver it once. That was my reward for winning some kind of a speech contest. It's horrible. Nobody likes that. The Gettysburg Address, I guess, is like 300 words long. And if you say them all out loud, it's like, that's, and even, it's right. It is. That's right. That'd be you, right? There's actually a sentence in Les Mis that is 673 words long. I think I read that when I was researching something else. And okay, they can get away with it because Les Mis is very interesting, but Victor Hugo also wrote way before the 8-second generation. Okay. So Victor Hugo can write whatever the hell he wants at that period in time because people did not have Netflix. And so that makes a big difference. If you look at just how quickly you scroll through the offerings on Netflix or Amazon or TikTok or whatever you're watching, that is your reader going, okay, this is boring. I'm going to close this book and I'm going to go watch, you know, the next season of Bridgerton, right? This is what you're competing against. So people have to be interested all the time to stay on the page. I was reading a book that I won't tell you who it is because I don't like to complain about other authors because some people love them. He did have like it was like a bestseller of some sort, but he had, no lie, 7 pages of backstory of the guy just thinking while he's standing in the driveway of this woman's house and waiting to talk, and she's going to talk to him. And she's not just basically staring at him, I guess, because what else is she going to do? 7 pages. I was like, no, I'm done. I'm done now. I don't care about the history of the Native American land there at this point. It's interesting history, but I didn't care anymore because nothing was happening in the book. And it was like listening to a lecture. And then you want to make it show, not tell. So you need to know your characters. You really need to know them well. Their prejudices, their fears, their experiences, their education level, right? If they're a Broadway show fan, they're going to use different language than somebody that is a professor of quantum physics, right? They're going to talk differently. If they came from the South, they're going to talk differently than the North. And most of us know that. But if you can drill down on your character's history, and you know that they came from a small town in the South where they were bullied by their friends, and they were one of only like 50 kids in their graduating class, and they graduated at the bottom of the class, and their parents were alcoholics. And then you start thinking about, well, how would that person talk? It's probably not with a lot of big words and a lot of authority because they've got a whole lot going on from their childhood, right? That affects how we engage with other people, not just the words that we choose, but how many we choose and how open we are to them, right? Some guy that has been really, really scarred by his past, his wife left him, you know, in the middle of she told him she wanted a divorce in the middle of having their baby. Like, he's not going to be opening up to other women going, oh, you believe what happened to me when my wife was having a baby, because he's been scarred and he's been very, very hurt. So that makes sense with the characters. I'm reading Before I Let Go, I think that's what it's called, by Kennedy Ryan. And I love her. She's a very good writer. Hosea and Yasmin have been divorced. And part of the reason that they've been divorced, and I'm not giving anything away because it's like on the first page, is because he never opened up to her. And you can actually see Kennedy Ryan do that on the page with that character as it goes along, about how he kind of avoids conversations. He doesn't talk about the hard stuff until it gets later on and he has had emotional growth, which all your characters have to have. So that's what I'm saying about the internal plot. You can show it by showing the character doing exactly what has driven his ex-wife crazy for years. And you can show the ramifications of that. It's not just that he's not a guy that shares, it's the impact of him not sharing. Him not sharing and continuing to do that in the book drives his family away, makes them assume things that aren't true, costs him everything that he wants. So there is impact. And when they have impact, they finally decide to grow up and change. And so that's what makes him finally start opening up. So that's that whole internal plot. And if you know your character really well, then you will know whether they're going to say these things or not. Alexis person or Hugo, if anybody remembers Hugo's, they're different people. I'm not talking about just a class differential. But the way that somebody that drives a Lexus dresses differently, typically has, you know, a really fancy kind of job, typically. And this is just stereotypes, not necessarily exactly what they all are. But most Yugo people that I knew that drove a Yugo was very unusual, probably stuff I can't get into in public, but he was a very unusual kind of hippie guy. And that fit, like he was cutting limes for a drink on the dashboard of his Yugo while he was driving. I was like 19. It was a long time ago. It was hilarious. But the Lexus people are probably going to be wearing a suit and tie and going to work and, you know, having a good job with a 401k plan. Yugo guy, he was 45 and he worked in the warehouse of a Macy's type store. So I don't think he had a 401k plan. And how those people are going to talk and act with other people, how they're going to be open about their emotions is totally different. Are they a male or female, a billionaire or a teenager? Again, that all makes a difference, especially if you're writing young adults from today's generation. They're very different from how my kids were when they were 15. You've really got to study that whole pattern of how those kids talk. And the great thing about today is that there is a huge volume that you can just sit there and scroll through, like TikTok and Instagram. And you gotta know where the kids are if you're gonna write a kid. Kids are on TikTok. I've been told that Facebook's not cool anymore. So they're on TikTok and all of those other platforms, and just watch them talk. Watch how they do stuff. Watch how they engage with each other. And use the words that they would use. So they're probably not going to use the word hippie like I would. They're going to use something else. Every once in a while, I subscribe to Urban Dictionary Word of the Day, and it'll give you kind of like hip words. And my kids, when I see, we have 5 kids between us, and when the kids come over, I'm like, 100p kids, 100p, and they're like, what? I'm like, that means 100%. That's what you guys are saying. And they're like, no, we're not saying 100p. Like, no, the Urban Dictionary told me you are. So, okay, so this book was the best romance of the year. This was actually the book that finally sold. So I wrote 10 books in 8 years. My own agent at the time said I did not have what it took to be published. This was before Amazon was like really a thing. And back then it was like, you were a crappy writer if you self-published back then. So she's like, maybe you could self-publish. You know, it was really, really the unwanted stepchild that you keep in the closet under the stairs back then. And eventually I did sell it to Harlequin, but they had me rewrite it entirely because the hero at the time was a recovering alcoholic who thought he killed his own baby. And they're like, you're actually a comedy writer. I had a funny scene in there. So I rewrote it as a romantic comedy, and that's how I ended up writing romantic comedies. But if you look at how the hero's dialogue at the beginning is, he's telling her a big emotional thing. This is like 3/4 of the way through the book, maybe even 4/5, very close to the end. He's finally confessing what's going on with him and why he is so upset with his ex-wife. And he doesn't just like blurt it all out, because men don't talk like that. Women will tend to go on more. Men will kind of hesitate. They'll drag it out a little bit. All of that will happen. And so you can see when you look at how the hot dialogue is highlighted for him, he's breaking it up with actions, with things. And then I'm also rolling in the setting. And the setting is reflecting the mood between the characters. It's not just there for chuckles. Like, it's not a sunny beach day where little kids are running by. It's a rainy, dark, sad day. And so then when you see down to the bottom of the page, the dam against his grief shattered, he finally opens up, and then his dialogue expands. You can see how he can say a lot more sentences strung together, because what happens now, he trusts her. He's finally gotten over that internal hump of not wanting to talk about it. It's made a difference in how he talks. So that's what made that book the best romance of the year, which I actually did send a letter to my first agent and told her this was rated the best romance of the year that year, because I was a terrible person. So you always want to make it advance the internal plot. Characters must grow and change. And every once in a while on my channel, I'll have an argument with somebody, not argument, but, you know, disagreement with somebody in the comments about, well, I like them just the way they are. I'm like, well, your reader doesn't want to read that. We read about other people growing and changing, so we don't have to do it because we don't want to, right? We're very happy in our little introverted box, you know, doing life the same way we do it every single day. People do not grow and change unless they are forced to. After I got divorced 15 years ago, and I was a wreck for a lot of reasons that I'm not going to get into, but there was a lot going on in my life at that time. And I was constantly fixated on it. I was a very anxious, insecure mess. And so I would talk to my friends and be like constantly focused on the same thing. It was like a running record with me. And one of my friends actually called me and said, I can no longer be your friend, me and the other person, because she wasn't brave enough to call me, but we're no longer going to be your friend because all you do is fixate on your own problems and you don't know anything about us. And I was like, wait, I'm the a-hole here? And so I changed. I decided that's it, I'm going to change. And so that was what set me personally on my own journey to grow and change and become a better person who remembers my best friend's sister's name. Because I literally did not do that then. Now, I'm just going to say I have really good motivation for the way I was at the time, but you've got to grow and change. So the characters must have a reason for that, and we've got to see them do that. And their dialogue is a way to show, not tell that growth. Because when they're saying things that they wouldn't have said otherwise, when they're admitting things that are scaring them or admitting that they need help, whatever is going on in your plot, that shows it. You want to think about how people would expose a secret or fear. They don't just blurt it out, you know, they kind of like tiptoe around it and sort of scoot it out a little bit at a time, or they'll do it in their actions and somebody will confront them and then they'll be like, yes, I am kind of afraid of heights, whatever that is, right? And like I was terrified of heights. I'm still terrified of heights at water parks, and I would pray the whole way I'm climbing up the ladder for the baby water slides. I never went to like the huge ones with my kids, that I wouldn't cry in front of them because I was so terrified. And the kids could tell because I'd be gripping onto the thing and the guy would have to talk me, you know, off the ledge. And I finally had to tell them because they were like, Mom, are you okay? I'm terrified of this. I cannot do it anymore. And now I'm old enough that my kids all went zip lining. My kids are all adults. I'm like, I don't even have to pretend I want to do that anymore. So that's kind of how things go, right? You don't just blurt it out. I'm afraid of heights, kids. I'm not going to go up there. You're on your own, you know, have fun. Like people don't do that. So they'll use actions or movements to gradually share. So this book got a starred review in PW, I believe. It did very, very well. It's a reissue of a book that had done very well the first time. And this is him confronting her about leaving. You can't tell me that, you keep telling me I'm the one that's running. And she has told him this the whole time because he's gone blind from an accident that he thinks was his fault. And he has finally gotten over his stuff and he confronts her finally, because they don't all get over their stuff at the same time. Like he's decided that he's okay. And she finally admits, because he has confronted her on this because of the actions, and they're at the top of this lighthouse. There's like they're at the top of a cliff, and it's sort of symbolic of all the choices she has to make. She finally admits, I don't stay in one place because I screwed up my first marriage. And he's like, why? What's the worst that can happen? And this is a you got mail kind of thing. Like, what will argue about which video to write or to rent? And she's like, no, that's not it. And he confronts her. Now the storm is getting worse and she doesn't say anything because people don't just blurt out their crap. And it takes a while for her to say, she says, I'm afraid. And then she moves and then he comes back closer. And he realizes that if he kind of pushes her, that this will help her like it did him. And she finally admits, I'm afraid you'll leave me. And then she falls off the cliff, but she lives. It's okay. I'm not giving anything away here. She does live. It is a romance. But you see how it took a bit. She didn't just come up to him and go, yeah, we can't get together. I'm afraid you're going to leave me. Because who says that out loud? Nobody, unless we're kind of forced to, right? We really don't, because it's a newish relationship. They've not been married for 45 years. That makes a difference. Then you might be able to tell your husband that. But when it's a newish relationship, you've been together for like, 3 months in this book, I think. You don't just blurt your feelings out. It takes a little bit to grow and change. So you do not want to make it an argument, a soap opera on a Friday, out of character, or a monologue with no action, because that is no fun to read. You need to be aware of where you're at in the plot. So Olivia would have never said that in chapter 3, because that's way too early in her internal growth, right? Her emotional arc. She's not ready at that point to face what really got her in trouble in the first place. You got to know where the other characters are and what they're doing, so you don't end up with a gunfight where people are just standing around. And you got to know where you want to go next. So if you lay out all of the feelings and emotions and all of that too early on, then you kind of box yourself into a corner and you don't have anywhere else for the characters to go. If you've got to kind of set something up for the plot, then you need to be aware of that when the characters are talking. So this is from Ruth Ware's The It Girl, because I'm not going to just make you look at my own books. And I love Ruth Ware. I think she's a very, very good suspense writer. I love what she does. And her mother have a conversation about this guy that she went to school with that died. And it's a very natural kind of conversation. Her response is natural, like she's feeling nausea. So the reader knows, this is in the first chapter, the reader knows there's something else going on. Either she's pregnant or there's something else going on because now she's nauseous. And she's walking around the shop that she's working in. And as her mother is trying to tell her what's happening, she's doing stuff, right? She's sitting down on the stool, she's putting her hand over her stomach and all of that. And her mother keeps asking her, are you okay? And she's like, yeah, of course I am. Because what does Hannah do? Hannah lies to herself all the time. And we know this by the end of the book, what she has actually lied to herself about with this entire thing. But the author has set that up very nicely there, that she's lying about something, and we can tell by narrative as well that she's lying and hiding something about John Neville. So she is laying the groundwork for what's going to come 500 pages later. Okay, so I'm hoping, I don't even know what time I was supposed to stop, but I think I was supposed to leave like 5 or 10 minutes for questions, right? I talked very fast. I'm sorry. I was very nervous the whole time. Whoops. Well, okay, let's stay there. So I recommend these books. Obviously, Writing Compelling Fiction is the best book on writing fiction in the whole wide world. I love The Writer's Journey. I use it all the time. I like that structure. I love analyzing it in movies I watch. I've always loved writing the breakout novel. And Becca Simey's book I read in one sitting on a plane, and it was just so direct and frank about our own internal emotional issues as writers and creatives. And I really like that. So I definitely recommend her book. And I love her whole no BS approach. And then if you want to watch my channel, this is it on YouTube, and the mastermind group information is there. And if you click into the descriptions of my videos on YouTube, there is also a link to my circle community. My circle community is free. The masterminds get their own section where they can talk amongst each other about their books, and they don't have to like share their pages in front of other people. But the rest of the community is free, and it's filled with handouts and resources. And a lot of times I'll load my slides from something that I've presented, so everybody in the circle community can see it, and it's there for like a week. So there's a ton of resources in there in general, and it's free. Questions?
One mastermind group, or you have
I have 2 right now. And I have 2 openings at the moment because people come and go, you know, as their lives change. So yeah, I'm trying to have growth that works with because I actually run an entire company during the day for nonfiction ghostwriting and book editing. I have multiple editors and a cover designer and all of that. So all of this is my free time. I don't have a lot, but yeah. This is what I would rather do all day if I could, but we all know they don't pay authors enough money to do that all day. So questions, and if there's a question in the chat, I don't think I can click on it without clicking out of my PowerPoint. So
I have a question in on the Zoom.
Was beginning the books that didn't sell.
mhm.
Do you think you mentioned like there's 20 million books? Do you think there's a lot of books that are almost today that are like that?
Oh yeah. Oh yes. There is a lot of people. I was just talking to a guy the other day. He's 74. He's written his first book and he wants to get it on Amazon. Like he immediately wanted me to do that. And I said, let me take a look at it first. And oh my God, it was bad. It was really, really bad. But he was so proud of it. So I have to find this really nice way to say to him, this is a horrendous book. Please don't publish it. Because I think the ease of doing it make people rush to publish a book. And I tell everybody, it's like trying to get to the NBA. You can be really, really good at basketball. You can be on the varsity team as a freshman. Doesn't mean you're going to make it to the NBA. The amount of hours those people put in order to be in the NBA is what makes the difference between a really great player and just somebody that plays in the backyard with the hoop there. And if you want to be a really great author, because the great book is what sells the next book, then you have to put in the time. You have to put in the effort. You can't just write something and slap it up there. And I don't care how many best-selling authors you hear that say, I just wrote a book in a snowstorm and sold it. That's not how it works for any of us. Because when you actually know them as human beings, you know that they did a lot more than that they went through a much bigger process to write their book and get it up there. It's a big learning curve. these we can be natural storytellers, but that doesn't mean we know how to layer in dialogue and pacing and narrative and all of that. There's a formula to it. And I'm not talking about a romance formula. There is structure to books that most people don't understand until you really get into learning about it. That was a very long answer to your question, sorry. Anybody else?
I have a question.
I do, yes, I have copies of my book and I can sound like in between, I guess. I think I kind of know the schedule and then after the second presentation too. And if I talk super fast in the second presentation, I can go back and tell you all the other things that are wrong with those ones that didn't sell as well. So yes, so like, I don't know, we'll do like $5 for my books and my novels and like 15 for writing compelling fiction. And I do Venmo and cash. I actually brought change this time, Maggie. I'm very proud of myself.
It's
So
really nice to know that someone as successful as you had some books that were definitely rejected.
Yeah.
they were, you saw how bad they were. They were so bad. And I, at the time, thought they were amazing. I could not understand why they would reject them. I was too into the dream of being a writer. I was too into the fact that I had created this beautiful baby to even begin to see that it was ugly and misshapen, you know? So,
I have a question.
yes. 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 And it prepares you for Amazon reviews,
Yeah.
you know, so it does, it emotionally prepares you because every once in a while I'll have somebody that'll post on an Amazon review or on my channel, like, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, can I just run the commercial, my credentials and you can say if I know what I'm talking about, but yeah, I don't do that.
How much is writing?
15. Yeah, just flat, easy. Was there any questions in the chat? Okay. Well, I must have done an outstanding job.
I had a question. I don't know if you can hear me.
You can write that, so it's all of your various books.
No, so I have not, because this is my free time thing. All of my fiction has become my free time thing. My company exploded during COVID, like it grew so fast. I wasn't really prepared for that. I still have contracts with Harlequin and Hachette. I don't think I'm going to renew them, and it's more a matter of time than desire, because I would write fiction all day long, but I'd be a fool to not pursue what's making the money right now. So
You find your good stuff that you want, you able to make money as a.
no, not necessarily. No, I was surprised. Like I really thought that being in India, I would make a lot more money, but not necessarily. Well, and also it's kind of hard to judge because the very first book that I had come out, the one that was the best romance of the year, I mean, that sold 97,000 copies in its first year. So that was back in the day with Harlequin, like 2003. So it was a whole different ballgame there. And I'm still not making money off that book, but still off the foreign editions because they retain foreign rights. So it's not apples to oranges. I mean, it's apples to oranges, not apples to apples. And I wouldn't say that the indie does exceedingly well, except for the how-to book. Now, to explain that too, I don't advertise. I don't promote it. I have not updated my Shirley Jump website in a really long time. I don't do a newsletter anymore. So I'm kind of like shooting my own self in my foot, but there are only so many hours in the day and only so many people I can keep on my staff. And so the different things get priorities over the years. And I did just get married 2 years ago. So I'm all like, I'm going to be with my husband, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of factors at play there. I don't do the marketing part. I used to write in marketing and that was my job for several years. And I would rather chew off my own arm than ever go back to marketing. I despise it so much. But the only way to really get discovered and to be successful is to write a really good book. Now, we all know a couple of crappy authors that never should have been published that just took off because they were right time, right place, right phase of the moon, right? Like Sylvia Day, who I love, and I think she's great, but I think there were other authors in her genre that were much better at it. I'm not saying she's a bad author. I'm just saying that there were others that were much better at the genre than she was, but she happened to hit at the right time with the right product. So that happens, right? And so there's nothing that you can do to really control the outcome, because you could come up with this great small town story set in Maryland and Nora Roberts can come up with one the same day and you're kind of screwed on your sales. But if you write a really good book, people talk about it. We've seen what book talk does for other authors. People will talk about a great book if they love it. So writing a crappy book, frankly, doesn't do you any favors. The best way to get somebody to read your next book is to write a really great book the first time. So you know, I don't help them with discoverability, but I do help them write a really great book. So by telling them all the things they're doing wrong.
It was like a monthly meeting.
It's a monthly therapy group, but yes. Because I do tell them everything that they're doing wrong, these poor brave souls. And some of them we've worked on the same chapter for 3 or 4 months because they're really trying to get it. I'm trying to teach them all of this at one time, right? And so the 5 that get chosen each month, I go in and I really go in depth on their pages and telling them what they do wrong. So yeah, once a month, it meets once a month, but they have their whole own community sectioning circle so they can talk to each other if they like revise their scene or whatever. So yes.
The difference between, domestic public and I recently read a very disheartening article about a book that's coming out soon that already has women's rights and all kinds of other things in it's a first time novel for the author and selling like selling all these other things like crazy. It hasn't even come out to the general public yet.
Right.
Pre-order. And the article said that it was not a very well written book. It was all kinds of editorial, wasn't even edited properly.
Right.
It was very disheartening. Do you think that traditional publishers are becoming more lax because of publishing?
Yes, no, well, not entirely. So I have a friend that is the head of production at Hachette, and she's been there for forever. And she will once in a while tell me about a book that they rushed through production for the same reasons. Like there was a movie right and they wanted to time it just right, blah, blah, blah. And so the editor didn't have time to go in and do what they should be doing. And so it did come up with, I ended up buying it just because I was curious to see what happened. And she was horrified as the proofreader and copy editor. Like at that point that you couldn't change a lot of it, because you can only change like 5% or something. And it was bad. It was really bad. But it had all of these deals and they didn't want to miss that window of sales because 8-second attention span, that window's closed in 8 seconds. So, but I also think that on the indie side, there are a lot of people that rush books to market that shouldn't, that don't do proper editing. They maybe don't have the budget, and I get it, to work with somebody like me, for instance. If I was going to edit your book, it'd be extremely expensive because I don't edit fiction because it is a nightmare. But when you work with me for nonfiction, it's very expensive as well because there's a lot that goes into it. And I am trying to teach you how to write a book. And so they skimp on the editing. They hire somebody, English isn't even their native language, and then think, oh, that's good. It's good enough. And this is the product that represents you and gives you the chance to get the next reader or not. And so if you skimp on all of that, then you're not going to have a good career. It's very hard. You can have that one takeoff. There's a 1% in every career, every industry, right? There's 1% of a 1% that are the Stephen Kings of the world that make that kind of money. I think it's 99% of authors don't make real money on their books. So you've got to start with a really good product in the first place. And if you don't have the money for a really good editor, then you've got to find a really good critique group. Because back when I was trying to get published, I had a really great critique partner. And she will still to this day tell me, that sucks, you should rewrite it. So that helped a lot, but I also educated myself constantly. I went to classes, I read books and everything else because I had no money for anything, and it didn't really exist. The industry didn't really exist back then, but I did everything I could to learn. And the 100% the reason I started this channel is because I feel like there's not enough information out there. People don't know, and they get information. So I probably shouldn't say it on Zoom because now it's on video, but my main competition on YouTube is a girl who's published one book. In my mind, I'm like, what do you know from one book? I've published 85 and have more than 10 that never made it, that got rejected for some reason or another. You learn a lot from writing just 10 books, never mind 85. A lot more than you know from one. And so I'm thinking people need to know how to do this stuff. And I'm trying to tell you all the mistakes that I made so that you don't have to make them. Hopefully you don't have to write 10 books in 8 years. Maybe you just write 2 or 1. Nothing teaches you more about how to write a book than actually writing a book, even if it's a crappy book, and then getting it done, because you learn more about getting through that middle than you do from anything else. Very long answers to my questions. Sorry.
Now that with your experience,
If I didn't have the company, so it's a very fast time. So my company alone puts out 20, 25 books a year. So I oversee all of them. I don't work one-on-one with every one of my clients, but I'm doing 20 to 25 books a year from a company. I was writing 3 or 4 books of my own a year. I had to stop that this year as we grew. But yeah, I can write a book in like a couple of months. But here's the thing, all of this is in my head. It's all there. I don't consciously think about it. I go, oh, this should really have some conflict here. Like I know it, just like I said, like the NBA player, he's going to know just from experience when to move, when not to move, when to shoot, when not to. He can be 1 millimeter different in the free throw place and know how that's going to end up. So that's what happens when you write a lot and read a lot. I'm always astounded by authors who say, I don't read. I'm like, how the hell do you learn how to write? You have to read to get an innate sense of story. And you have to read more than just your own genre. Because when you read other genres, you see you kind of see the whole matrix come together like this. It all works the same way. And you begin to develop that sense of story and see how other people do it. Okay. And if you had a question in the chat, I don't think I can do it. I don't know. Let me see if I can. Can you tell us about your writing schedule? Okay. Can you get handouts from the event? Gloria asked. And can you tell me about your writing schedule? So anybody that joins me on my Friday writing sprints, so we have free writing sprints on Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern, knows that there are very many weeks where I am not writing fiction at all. It like I said, the company has mushroomed and I have not had enough time to keep up with it and do the channel. So something had to go. But I also don't have any contracts, and that's at this moment, and I'm very happy with that. I don't really want one. And I'm kind of figuring out what I want to do next, because 85 of very similar books is a lot. So they're not all the same kind of book. I'd say like 75 of them are romance or women's fiction. I'm a little over it. Like, and here's the other ironic thing. When I fell in love with my second husband, who is an amazing person, I didn't want to write romance anymore. I was like, I don't want to make it up. I've already got it. Like, now it's boring. And I had made it up all my life because I was so desperately unhappy in my first marriage that I was just like, I'm just going to make up what it is. How do you access the handouts from your YouTube videos? They're in the description. So if you click on the video and you click on the description, everything is under there. There's all kinds of resource links and stuff like that. So, and if once you get into the Circle community, you got to sign up, but once you're in there, you'll see a lot of stuff is there. And I will end up putting the handouts from this on the Circle community too, because I am just kind of a hussy that's going to make you join my community to get my handouts.
Is it just the Circle?
It's a Circle is like, it's like forums of the day. It's just, it's like Discord. You guys, a cult. Oh, I'll send it out to all of you guys. I'll send it to Maggie afterwards, but it's writing-compelling-fiction.circle.so. But it's like a Discord kind of one of those things. I just wanted a platform I controlled, not some crazy guy going into space. So.
Are you on Discord?
No, I weighed the pros and cons of the both of them, and Circle just seemed to have what I wanted more. So yeah, it's just like a Discord.
Okay.
This is the same thing.
And then if you're saying you've got 25 this year, is that the same as your master? Like what is your company?
So we do ghostwriting and book editing I work with TV celebrities and NFL players and White House advisors. I personally do that. My other editors work with like entrepreneurs and like ordinary people, because we have different levels. Yeah, because I have an NDA and everything, but it like I said, it mushroomed when I did not expect it to. So it's become a very good company. But then I have, like I said, multiple editors that work for me, and I oversee all of the other books.
So they're all nonfiction?
Yeah, because I will not edit fiction. Like you could not pay me as much as you pay me for a nonfiction book to edit a fiction novel. I used to do that back in the day, and it's a lot of work. First, if you have somebody that doesn't know anything about fiction. People that do, that's not so bad, but I don't know what I'm getting. So it's very time intensive, because I really want to sit there and rewrite it or show you exactly how to show, not tell here, instead of just saying, this should be stronger. That doesn't help anybody. So.
How do you feel about AI?
I don't use it at all. Once in a while, maybe I'll do a YouTube description with it, because I feel like it's too stilted. The clients will ask me, can I write my book in AI and give it to you? And I'm like, oh my God, please don't do that. I would much rather me control the process than some computer control the process. So maybe eventually I'll be out of a job, but hopefully I'll have made enough to retire by then. That's my goal. So yes. Okay. So do we do a break in between, or do I just go right into the next one?
Take 5 minutes. 5 minutes, go back.
Okay.
Set the timer, y'all, for 5 minutes. Yeah. And I rewrote it, by the way, so copy did not like as prominent and it's still in there.
Okay, so you all already know who I am, and thank you for those who stayed through the break and didn't fail. But because you stayed, I have giveaways. So I put an envelope in front of Leah. If you guys just want to put a piece of paper with your name on it, I have 3 arcs. I'm sorry to the you Zoom people. I don't know how to put your name in the thing. I have 3 arcs and 2 little if you drink, well, actually, if you're just somebody in here that drinks Starbucks, let me know, because I don't, but my cover designer gave me these little coffee cup hole things, like these put in the hole. I don't drink Starbucks, so don't tell her. I thought they would do that. And I also want to mention too, that those of you who got writing compelling fiction, I am coming out with a workbook in my spare time. It's almost done. It's actually what I've been working on every week. So there's going to be a writing compelling fiction workbook that will have all of the more than what I have for handouts and circle, with lots of exercises and things like that for you to do. I don't actually do exercises, but I do look at those questions and think about those things for myself. Okay, so let's talk about 5, 6, whatever techniques to create more compelling novels. Like it's so, oh no, I am not sharing my screen. That's the problem. I was like, why am I staring at myself? I don't like it. I share my screen.
It's sharing.
Not for the Zoom people. So, okay, so those of you that want to put your hands up, like, let's do it after, because I can't manage like both things because I can't see the Zoom. I can kind of see the Zoom here, but I'm not really paying attention. All right, so 5, 6 techniques to create more compelling novels. I see a lot of problems, obviously, in the books that I work with, which is this predictable, episodic, or disjointed plots. I had a lot of rejection letters that use those words, and I was like, don't know what that means. Well, predictable, it's just everybody knows what's going to happen next. There's no twists or turns. Episodic is when the plot isn't interlinked, and disjointed is when it just doesn't make sense. Characters that read flat. This is a really common problem. A lot of people write really flat characters. And I'm going to harp on this. I harp on it in almost every video. Minimal internal plot and growth, because the internal plot is the one that the reader connects with. You can write the best car chases in the whole wide world. The reader does not give a damn unless they are connected to them. And they connect through the internal plot. So none of the action will matter or connect the reader to the book if they don't care about the character. And there, lack of emotional connections. Then it's actually number 1, but I wanted to kind of, reveal, this is kind of cool, right? So these 2 questions will change everything. If you want to sleep through the presentation after this, that's totally cool. Because if you ask why and what was the impact, that will tell you more about every single part of your book than anything else. So I use this when I develop a character. Like if I decide that this character comes from divorced parents, I ask, why did they get a divorce? What was the impact on him? But I also want to know, why did they get married in the first place? Why did they fall in love with each other? Why did they meet? What was the impact of falling in love with each other? What was the impact of the divorce on the kids? What was the impact of the divorce on their jobs, on where they lived? What was the impact? When you take just a tiny thing, like my hero's parents got divorced when he was 10. And you take, what was the impact on him? It probably made him less trusting of relationships, right? It probably made him feel insecure about the future, because a 10-year-old in the middle of a divorce is affected a lot differently than a 15 or a 25-year-old or a 2-year-old. So if you know, that's what I was talking about in the last workshop too. If you know more about your character, you know how they're going to react. So you got to know when their parents got divorced and what was the impact on them and how is that impact affecting them today. So you can ask that about anything. Why did he grow up in a small town? Well, because that's where his parents moved, because they were farmers. What was the impact on him of living in a small town and growing up on a farm, as opposed to living in New York City and going to Juilliard? Like, what's the impact? You need to know these things because it makes a huge difference in your book. So why was poor Batman's parents murdered? And what was the impact? Well, he became this like vengeful person that's trying to kill Superman there. Not a good choice. But you can see the direct impact of Batman's parents being killed when he was like 9 or 10 years old and what he became, an Avenger kind of guy, right? There's a direct correlation between there. Does Batman get close to women? No. Does he have any friends? No, because he doesn't like to get emotionally connected to people because they could die on the street in front of him. This was a very traumatic experience for him that had a huge impact and made him basically a loner. So then the second one is deep emotional wounds. And you'll hear me talk about these a lot in my videos. They're covered in the book. They're really, really critical. So we all have deep emotional wounds. Dr. Phil talks about everybody has 10 pivotal moments in their life. I actually think everybody has at least 3 deep emotional wounds that come from your past. It could be just like last week when you got a divorce or, you know, were mugged or something. But there's also the things that happened to you as a child. It can be something small, like being forgotten on the side of the highway when your parents stopped to pet the baby gators at the Florida Citrus Center. I asked my husband every time he passed a stop, so I could pet the baby gators, and he says no. I've actually pet baby gators before, and he reminds me of that. But anyway, that small thing of being abandoned on the side of the road, not on purpose, maybe by accident by your parents when you are 2 years old, has a huge impact on you emotionally. Also, a divorce, a sexual assault, a mugging, a bankruptcy, and all of those kinds of things create deep emotional wounds, a huge betrayal, you know, a very close family member dying, you know, in front of you. There are deep emotional wounds that all of us have. If you don't know what your characters are, then you're not going to be able to create this super emotionally connecting character. Because I got to tell you, the big secret to this, which is why I said you could fall asleep, is that compelling novels have an emotional connection with the reader. And everybody thinks, well, it's really that I got to get this plot moving. It's got to be really, you know, chasing along, racing and all of that. No, people worry about what happens next when they care about it. So if you don't have that, they don't care. And when you have deep emotional wounds, what that does is creates a bond with the reader, because the reader has deep emotional wounds too. They can relate to that insecurity or anxiety or fear that your character has because they have something similar. It doesn't have to be the same thing. If you look at, like, say, Sophie's Choice, where she has to send one of her children to the gas chamber. None of us, thank God, have ever had to go through that, right? But we can totally, especially if you're a parent, understand the heartbreak of that decision of putting one of your children into a bad situation or having to choose between them or having to lose one of them. Because when she sends that kid to the gas chamber, she knows he's going to die. So anyone who has been a parent or has been close to a little kid knows that trauma of losing a child. It is a trauma that never goes away. And so when we read Sophie's Choice, we are right there with Sophie, feeling so horrendous for her because we can relate to that deep emotional wound. So you need to know, what 3 traumatic events did your main character have in the past? You really got to think about it. They need to have some. Nobody gets through life all happy dappy, nothing ever goes wrong. They never bounce a check, you know, they never get in a car accident, they never lose a close family members. No one gets through life like that. We all have traumatic events. Unless your character is like 3 years old, they probably only have like 1. But everybody has had them. When you have a young adult character who's like 15, they probably had bullying or seen their best friend be bullied. In today's age, they've probably seen violence in school. There was shooting at my son's school in Florida the first week we moved here. It's like, okay, so we're going to go to electronic school now, because I had never been around something like that before. And then what was the impact of these events? That is the most important thing to know. What was the impact of them physically and emotionally? So the people that lock themselves in their homes and, you know, never go out, they had some kind of a trauma that put them there. And the people that, you know, don't trust other people had some kind of a trauma that put them there. So you have to know what was the impact and the insecurities, anxieties, or fears that creates in your character. Because nobody likes people that are always confident, everything goes just well for them. Nobody likes those people. We all know those people because they're called influencers. And they're all like, my life is so perfect. I don't know if you guys watch Campbell Puckett, the Pookie, Campbell Puckett and Jet. It's on TikTok. So they're wealthy. She's always wearing, you know, Chanel or whatever, and he's wearing Paige jeans or something, some kind of like designer thing. And he's always like, Pookie's on fire today. She's so cute. And she talks about her outfit, and then they do a little kiss and she does a little thing up. I hate them. But I watch them. I watch their channel. I don't know why, but their life is so perfect. You know, they're going to Turks and Caicos. They're going to Formula One. They don't seem to ever work a job. And they just talked about like what jobs they do. And she's like, I've been so lucky to always be an influencer. Like, I hate those people. Everybody does. If there was a book about Campbell and Jet, I would not read it because I don't care, right? How will all of that affect their reactions to events in the plot? Because that's why you're doing all this work, because you're going to figure out how they're going to react. Are they going to fight? Are they going to flee? Are they going to freeze? That's our 3 reactions to any kind of big event. Because what that gives you is their worst nightmare. And I love having a worst nightmare. Like if you've seen the episode with of Seinfeld with Kramer and the germaphobe, it's the most funny episode ever. I've watched it a million times. And she is a complete germaphobe, like, you know, always doing the wipes things way before COVID. And he makes a salad for dinner in his shower because he's figured out how to do a garbage disposal in a shower. And her face when she realizes that this was a salad he made in the shower is hilarious, because that is her worst nightmare. And that's great to know that, but you're going to use that in your plot because you want your character to face their worst nightmare over and over and over again. Because you know what that does? Makes them grow and change. Like, you know, all my friends going, we're done with you. That was a pretty awful, you know, isolating thing for me. That forced me to change and grow. So with Liam Neeson in Taken, which I've used that movie a lot to analyze because it's really got great structure for the plot. He is going to his ex-wife's house at the very beginning with flowers or a gift for his daughter, because he is emotionally on the outs with her and on the outs with his ex-wife, because his job has cost him his family, because he has never been there for them when they needed him, right? So he's trying to repair that. So his worst nightmare is to not be there for them when they need him. And what is the very first thing that happens? His daughter is kidnapped by these psychopathic guys because he wasn't there when she needed him. In fact, she lied to him about where she was even going because they have no emotional bond. And over again throughout Taken, the stakes get higher, things get worse because he's always just one step behind, right? So he's not there for her when she needs him. He sees the heroin den for all these poor girls and he rescues the wrong girl and realizes I wasn't there for her there then either. She's probably addicted to heroin or dead or something. So he is continually facing his worst nightmare. And the cool thing is he's using the very thing that created that problem in the first place to solve it. He's using his job, right? All those things that drove his family apart from him are what he's using to fix the worst nightmare. Now, not all plots necessarily work that way, but I do love it when they do. So how on earth do you solve that in a plot? The other movie I use all the time, anybody's heard me speak, is Shrek, because I love Shrek and most everybody's seen it. You give them weaknesses and skills and strengths. So when I plan a character, I want to know what their weaknesses are. And we all have them because nobody's perfect except maybe Campbell and Jet. And then you give them skills and strengths. So they're usually 2 sides of the same coin. So somebody that's very organized also could be to the point of OCD, or they could be one of those people that, you know, has to have everything perfect before they can make the next move, right? Somebody that's a planner could also be somebody that gets caught in that analysis paralysis where they're constantly looking at the different best routes to get to Geneva or wherever they're going. So those weaknesses and strengths should be 2 sides of the same coin. A really intelligent person usually overthinks things. You know, a really strong person is usually a loner. So how can their strengths, which we usually have a great time coming up with those because we love our characters, they're awesome people. How do we also make those weaknesses? You look at, say, John McClane in Die Hard, which every woman has been forced to watch at least once, but it's actually a really good movie for understanding structure. What are some of his skills and strengths? Right, he's a hero, right? Like he's a first responder kind of hero. What else? Yeah, he remains calm and pressure. Yeah, what else? Very intelligent, because it's not just thinking like the bad guys, like it's a broader thing. He's very intelligent, right? He's smart, super strong, right? Like because he climbs up things and doesn't even have shoes on. What are some of his weaknesses?
Later, but he's strong.
Well, he's always a drunk. Every time he's looking for some Tylenol, right? Like he's always hungover. So he is a loner, right? So he is not a team player. That is what got him in this situation in the first place. Because nobody will help him because they all hate him. So he may be very loyal to the people because that's one of his strengths. He's very loyal to the people he loves, like his wife. But he's a loner, so he drives them away, which is why she's divorcing him, which is why everybody hates him on the police force. He's very strong, but he's also very, he's like a independent kind of jerk. Like I don't need anybody. You know, he's very much like that. He's very smart, but he's also very sassy. And this is why Alan Rickman hates him, right? So he's got these skills and strengths and weaknesses that put him in this position. He's very stoic, but he doesn't deal with his emotions except with alcohol, right? So you can see how those things get him into trouble and help him out as well. So Shrek's weaknesses, what are some of Shrek's weaknesses? He's a loner.
That's it.
He's a little rude, yeah.
Cranky.
He's cranky, drives people away.
He doesn't feel that he is enough.
He's insecure, yes. And if you're listening to these, think about the movie. Where do you see his insecurity? Where do you see him driving people away? Where do you see his crankiness come up? How is that working in the plot of Shrek? It's not just knowing what these are, it's like knowing how they work. We won't go through all 6 because we don't have a lot of time, but what are some of his skills and strengths? What are the other sides of those same coins?
He has compassion.
Yes, he's loyal, right? He will do whatever it takes for his friends, even if he doesn't have any at the beginning. He's very loyal. He's brave. He goes and faces that dragon. He's determined. He's strong. All of those things. And think about when his bravery, his strength, his loyalty all came into play. So his ability to be loyal is what makes Gingy and Pinocchio and everybody go with him at the end to the castle to stop the wedding. So that strength of loyalty created those friends that come for him. But in the beginning, he almost doesn't even have him because his insecurity and crankiness pushes Donkey and everybody away, right? Like he wants to kick everybody out when the fairy tale creatures first show up in his swamp. He hates them. He yells at them. He's horrible to them. He's horrible to Donkey for a long time. But Donkey sees underneath those layers and he sees who Shrek really is. So if you only remember one thing, so I guess if you fell asleep, you need to wake up for this part, but your character's weaknesses will get them into trouble over and over again, and their skills and strengths will save the day. If you want to know how to create rising stakes, this is how you do it. Their weaknesses, all of those insecurities, anxieties, and fears, get them into trouble over and over again. So let's take a scene in Shrek. When Shrek is with Fiona and Donkey and she's in the cave and he's picking the daisy, how do his weaknesses get him into trouble in that scene? Remember, he's debating whether to tell her he loves her or not, because he's fallen in love by now. How does his weaknesses get him into trouble? Okay, so ultimately, what? Yes. Yes. Yes.
She's talking about herself and he thinks that she's talking about him.
Right.
And so he ends up not telling her the truth and there's this communication.
Right, because of his insecurity, right? That weakness of being insecure makes him misinterpret what she says. And how does that get him into trouble? She goes off with Lord Farquhar to go get married. So that kind of raises the stakes in the plot, right? And costs him the very thing that he wanted the most. So at the end, how do his skills and strengths save the day? Well, he bombards the castle, right? Like he gathers his friends. So that loyalty, that strength, that courage makes him go back to the town with the soldiers all in the audience, by the way, who literally have been trying to stab him with pitchforks his whole life. But his courage, his strength, his loyalty is what gets him into the castle to tell her he loves her, finally. So that's, if you look at this next movie or TV show you watch, I want you to look at how their weaknesses get them into trouble. Even something like Everybody Loves Raymond or Schitt's Creek, those great sitcoms, you can see how the characters' weaknesses in that single episode get them into trouble and how their strengths at the end save the day. So next time you sit down and watch anything, I want you to analyze it for this. Look at the scene. How did the character get into trouble? Why did they make things worse? Because that's what we do, right? We make things worse and worse and worse until we finally learn our lesson and change. So if you're going to want to list 6 of each, and you want to look at how these things will impact their reactions to plot events. So we saw that classic example with Shrek. His insecurity made him react in a different way than he would have if he was a confident guy, right? If he was a confident guy, he wouldn't have taken it as she's talking about me. He wouldn't have even thought of that. It wouldn't even occurred to him. So if you have a character who has a weakness like Deadpool or John McClane, who they mouth off, their mouths get away from them. If you look at Deadpool, he makes things worse over and over and over again because he can't keep his mouth shut and he ticks people off. That's what makes it a classic funny movie, but that's what gets him into trouble and gets people really mad at him. Same thing with John McClane. His mouth gets him into trouble a lot. And so that weakness of not being able to keep control of his sarcasm and his words create that reactions that create rising stakes. So that's basically the essence of scene and sequel. Oh, you guys can't see this. I just realized that, but I need to like kind of move this. Can I move this thing of this bar up? There we go. Sorry, I just realized that 2 hours in. Scene and sequel is essentially action, reaction. Something happens, the character reacts. And if you have their weaknesses create their reaction, then emotionally things are going to get worse. The stakes are going to get higher. Everything's going to matter more. But the action that they take in the next scene is created by their skills and strengths. So when Shrek doesn't tell Fiona how he feels because he's insecure, he has a scene where it's kind of like a licking his wound scene, but then his next action is to go get her. So that's created by his skills and strengths. Because we all know the scene and sequel is mostly all action, right? The scene is mostly all stuff happening, hopefully. The sequel is this very teeny tiny little part where the character's like, oh crap, I made this worse. Now I need to do this. You don't want a long sequel because sequel is essentially thinking. And as we learned in last hour, nobody likes to watch people think. So we want people to decide, oh crap, I just caused this and now I'm going to do this. And that's how you create a plot that is not episodic, that is not just disjointed, that literally interlocks with itself because their decision is created by their skills and strengths. Let's see, because I did that now it won't work. Oh, look at that. Okay. I know, right? Jacks of Sons of Anarchy. I missed that show. So the other thing that compelling plots have is really compelling, unique characters. You can't do this every time. If we could, we'd all be multimillionaires. But they are the Jacks, the Tony Soprano. They're the characters that are a cut above the rest. They're conflicted characters, right? Like, I loved Jax. I really wanted to see things work out for him, even though I know he's a terrible person doing terrible things. Right. And same thing with Tony Soprano. I mean, he kneecaps that guy in the first episode, but when he gets vulnerable with his therapist, you're like, oh, I kind of want to see his family work out. I was very mad that they probably died in that go to black ending. Very mad at that because I kind of wanted to see them get it. And that's the great thing about really compelling characters. When you look at Lost and why Lost was such a massive hit, it wasn't just because of the puzzles. It was because of Sawyer and what was the sign it with Jack and the guy that was the Israeli Saeed, the Iraqi torturer. Saeed was so complicated, right? Like he was an Iraqi torturer for prisoners who didn't want to be a torturer for prisoners. And Sawyer had such a complicated past, we just wanted to give him a hug, right? Reacher with Lee Child's books. Reacher is one of those cut above the rest characters. He's kind of a jerk to everybody because he doesn't really want to form relationships, but he is a hero underneath it all. So we love him. And one time I was at an RWA conference. I don't know if any of you were in this particular seminar. Suzanne Brockman had brought in Lee Child And Lee Child is really cute in real life. Like he's really tall. He's got an accent and I love an accent. And so he's talking all about, creating Reacher and everything. He's doing this whole seminar on it. And at the end, he has questions. And if you've read the Reacher books, you know that Reacher's always looking for a good cup of coffee throughout every single book. He loves his coffee. So some woman stands up in the back and she's like, I know that Reacher's always looking for a really good cup of coffee. And I just want to tell you, Lee Child, that I make a really good cup of coffee. And he got so red and he was like, I don't think my wife would like that. And it was so funny, but he was cute. He didn't look like Reacher because Reacher's like a giant guy, but he was tall and handsome. Anyways, they love deeply. Jax will do anything for his family. He really, really loves them. They are relatable and strong and sympathetic, and they are wounded. They have some serious deep emotional wounds. All of them do. They really do. Tony, Jax, the guy in Summersby, Richard Gere in Summersby was one of my very favorite movies ever. All of these characters that are forever characters that people will talk about for the rest of their lives are like this. These are not easy characters to create, but that's what they all have in common. So Inman and Cold Mountain, which I walked out and I was so angry at the end of this movie. But Inman and Cold Mountain and Nicole Kidman's characters, they have layered past. They have something that is worth fighting for. So when Nicole Kidman and Renee Zellweger, when they kind of do their own thing, then the neighbors have that horrible thing happen to them. I don't want to give the movie away if you haven't seen it, but they have something worth fighting for, and you're really rooting for them to succeed, even as you see this whole war going on. They have worthy adversaries. So Inman and Nicole Kidman's character have really bad guys. It's not just bad guys. They're really bad guys. Same thing in Taken. Liam Neeson has really bad guys. They're not the average that you can just, hit and they'll fall over and things are good and he can move on. You have to give them a really strong adversary. And tough moral choices. I love those. They're very hard to pull off. Not every book can have it. But when you can have a sacrifice, like a Tale of Two Cities kind of thing, it's awesome. And I mentioned Summersby, which I have seen like 11 times. I know how it ends. I've seen it 11 times. And every time I'm hoping it's going to end differently because the sacrifice in that movie is so heartbreaking. I really, really want it to work out every single time, and it never does, because he has a tough moral choice. And you have plenty of those in these characters that are really compelling, the ones that everybody talks about. So when you have a compelling, unique character, because books that people relate to, books that are compelling, don't have to have a lot of car chases. They can have all the car chases you want, but they're really about the characters. You have to know the why and the impact of their history. If you don't know that, you're not going to be able to create them. Their insecurities caused by their deep emotional wounds. Don't feel bad. These are not real people. You can give them really traumatic pasts. Please do that to them. Because the more trauma you can give them, the more the reader's just like, yeah, you go, girl, you can do this. Like they're really going to relate to that person. And make them face their worst nightmare. So many of us want to be so nice to our characters. And I talk about this a lot in my mastermind groups with my people in there. And I'm like, you're too nice. Like nothing's going wrong here. You got to really, really make things bad here for this character. Make them fail. You use their weaknesses to cause reactions and skills and strengths to create actions. So speaking of failure, that was the thing that I learned just before I sold my first book. I went to a workshop on conflict and I forgot who led it because I'm old, but she said that the number one thing you have to do to create conflict is make your character fail over and over and over again. Because we all know nobody learns from success. Like as much as we don't want to see our kids end up homeless because they decided to go to Coachella instead of their job, we really, really do know that that's how they're going to learn their lesson. If you pay for their Coachella and you pay for 3 months of rent because they got fired for going to Coachella, they don't learn anything. They just say, oh, I'm going to go to Coachella next year because mom's going to pay again. So failure is what teaches your characters and forces them to grow and change. So let them go after their goal and let them fail. Look at Liam Neeson in Taken. He keeps failing. He gets close, fails. He gets close, fails. He's never quite there in time, right? And we're pretty worried it's not going to work out for him. There was something else we were watching the other day, and I don't remember what it is, but we really did not think that it was going to work out for those people. And I was just on the edge of my seat. I didn't even go to bed like on my normal time. I was like, I gotta see if this works out, whatever movie we were watching. So that's what you've got to do to them. Make them fail, make them face their fears, give them lots of layers and depth. So how do you come up with all of these things? Because you're like, this is all great advice, and how the hell do I do it? You use my rule of 6, which is not patented. Please don't use it. So whenever I'm stuck or looking for something unique, I list 6 options. The reason why this works is back when I worked in marketing, there's something called the top of mind awareness, where if I had said name 5 brands of soda, 5 kinds of toothpaste, everybody can name 5 pretty easily. You get to number 4 and 5, you can struggle a little bit more, but generally you'll know them. The whole goal of advertisers is to be at the top 5 of your mind awareness, because our minds hold odd numbers of things. That's why you generally see odd numbers of bullets and things like that. Like 5 streaming services, boom, we can knock off, Netflix, Prime, Apple, and then you're kind of struggling for MGM Plus, because those aren't necessarily top of mind. It's the 6th one that your mind has to really dig for. It's because that's the way our brains work. So when you do 6, you're really starting to dig deeper. And if you don't believe this, try this with your own life. So I did this once with my girlfriend, who is also a runner. And because I was talking about the concept, and we talked about why do we run, right? And we're both like, oh, to stay in shape, to fit my bathing suit, all of these sort of surface areas. Because when you start doing this, you come up with the surface stuff, right? And then we kept going down more. I made her go to 6, and she made me go to 6. And this was just before, like 6 months before my first divorce, my only divorce, not even divorced again. But it was first 6 months before I divorced my first husband. And I realized that the reason I run is that it's the only time in my life I was completely in control. How fast I went, how far I went, how long I went. It was the only thing in my life at that time that I was completely in control of. That's deep and profound, and the kind of thing that'll make me cry, because that was part of the deep emotional wound. That was part of the motivation. And when I had that realization for myself, I was like, oh, that kind of sucks that that's the only thing in my life that I control, is how far I run. Running is hard and it's not fun. So I'd rather control other things. So when you can do that with your character, and you really go deep on the 6 reasons that they're doing something, 6 motivations, especially, that's where I really like to use it. You start to really get to the heart of the matter. And you can't cheat. You can't say, okay, so my 6 motivations for running are because I really want to be thin, and then because I really want to be a size 4. Okay, those are the same reason. So you can't cheat like that. You've got to come up with 6 unique ones. When I came up with the title for the Pride War Chocolate, that was my 6th title, because I had come up with a bunch of different title names before that. When I come up with plot twists, I come up with 6. Now, would I say all of my books always have great plot twists? No, because there's times when, like any writer, I'm a little lazier than other times. But when I really want it to stand out and be a really great book, I really dig deep into that 6. It works for anything you have to do. And I would suggest trying it for yourself, for something that you do all the time, and figure out your deep buried motivations. Like in my classes, we usually do, why do you take a shower in the morning? And it's like to feel fresh, to wake up, to go to work, I get a presentation, whatever, right? Like we all have those reasons. 99% of the time when we do it in a class, there's somebody that says, because I was bullied in 6th grade for not wearing deodorant, or I sat next to that girl that was bullied in 6th grade for not wearing deodorant. None of us think about that. The cool thing about these deep buried motivations is none of us are thinking about it. Your character's not thinking about it. Your character's not even aware of it. But if you are aware that your character is terrified of being bullied, and that is why she dresses like Campbell Puckett every day, then you're going to change the way you handle that character, because that's going to make a big difference. Maybe Campbell Puckett was really badly bullied as a kid, and so that's why she has to have this fame on it. I'm sorry to pick on her. Maybe she's a lovely person, but fame as an influencer, and why she has to wear Coach and she will not wear whatever Target brands are out there. That's a lot of what feeds people. So knowing that can make a huge difference. So the biggest problem with struggling plots is they have a lack of emotional stakes. It's always emotion. And those wounds, those come from deep emotional wounds. So that's what your characters need, is deep emotional wounds. They make them react instinctually to protect themselves, because that's what we do. We don't like dealing with our crap. Nobody does. So we will protect ourselves first, right? We'll walk away before that guy breaks our heart, or we'll lash out at that person before they're mean to us, or we'll avoid that situation entirely before we have to go be embarrassed and make a presentation in front of people and not know how to use the technology. So, you know, like if I'd been super afraid of embarrassing myself in front of you guys, I would have just like walked away. Sorry, here's my handouts on a PDF. Well, thankfully I'm not. But instead of being psychologically grown enough to respond thoughtfully, if you want the science, that's the whole amygdala kind of thing, that your amygdala just reacts. And then the rest of your prefrontal cortex is what thinks about it and takes a minute. Those reactions make the stakes rise. The character's reactions, immediate triggered reactions by their deep emotional wounds and their traumas and their insecurities, make the stakes rise, because you know what they make the character do? Fail. They make them make bad choices. And you're reading it going, don't do that. You know, go here, don't do that. Those same things are what make the stupid sorority girl sit there while Jason's climbing up the stairs. You know, because she's all into, I got to get all this gratification of these likes on my Instagram, instead of realizing there's a guy in a hockey mask behind her. The rising stakes create compelling plots, and those force the character to confront their deep emotional wounds. Because if we aren't forced to change, we won't. Frankly, we all get into our nice little happy places, and we will not change and grow up emotionally or change our reactions to things unless we're forced to, right? You have a heart attack, and then all of a sudden you've got to exercise, and you've been 75 years of never exercising. You were forced to do it because you had a big event that forced you to do it. It's the same way with the emotional growth of your characters. Of course, I recommend those same books because writing compelling fiction is the best ever. And then, oops, there's my channel, same channel thing, same ending thing. Okay, any questions? You put that first list of things not to do. I don't know if Joan means, Joan, do you mean the on here on this option or the one on dialogue? I'll have to know that. I don't know. That's on the chat. Sorry. Yes.
When you were studying writing fiction, you were cancer.
I'm a little of both. So I'd like to think I'm a plotter, but if I know how, so, you know, when you're traditionally published, they make you write a synopsis, and they make you write it before you've even written the book because they want to do the cover. I have no freaking idea what's going to happen in this book because I'm very much about writing from my gut, because I know these characters and I know they're going to react this way, and that's going to cause this new problem. Or I don't actually know how they're going to react until I get there, but I know them well enough to force that. So I'm a plantser, right? I'm a little bit of both because they force me to plot. Now, when I write my own books that are indie, I still do a little bit of that planning. I still have to know that everybody has a goal, motivation, and conflict. And I do the rule of 6 thing for their history, for their parents, for their last girlfriend, you know, for whatever's going to be integral to the plot. Why did they grow up in a small town? What was the impact? I do all of those kinds of things and come up with the reasons why. So yes. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Everything is hard. They never just gonna worn out this everybody else now. So I
Right.
think they have these. I know.
Right.
I almost like I can't relate to these characters because their trauma point is too, like they're
Too traumatic. Yes. Yes.
That balance of giving them something really does feel like a feeling without having tons of triggers.
You don't necessarily have to have tons of triggers, right? How many of us grew up watching Disney? How many parents are alive in a Disney cartoon? None, you know? Bambi's mother is shot in front of him. I was like 4, right? I was like 4 when I saw that. But that affects Bambi going forward. Snow White, I mean, she has somebody trying to kill her with an axe in Snow White, I think, or the hunter is trying to kill her, right? Like there's a lot of drama in Disney, but you could still take that trauma and turn it into something that's lighthearted, right? It doesn't have to be so traumatic that they're just overwhelmed with anxiety and fear and insecurity and they can't operate in the world. Everybody has something. You can't have them have nothing. And it can be as simple as being lost on the side of the road, or, you know, running away from home and getting lost, or some small thing that we would see as small. But to a 10-year-old or a 5-year-old, that's massive. And so that's going to make a difference in them. Not everybody has to have dead parents, but you can see if you look at Disney that they pull it off with comedies and sweet movies all the time. So it can work. Yes. Any other questions? Joan wants me to go back to the first list after the break. I don't know what list that is, but I think it's back to the 4 things that people do wrong. I think it's this one. Okay, yes, right, sorry.
You mentioned that Sophie's Choice,
Mhm.
I've never read it, but the plot, she has to choose which of the children to go to the,
Concentration camp, to the gas chamber, yes.
so just thinking about that makes me have personally,
Mhm.
no desire to read such a book because I don't want to experience that.
Right.
Why do readers want to experience these things? I mean, obviously it's a big hit.
Right, but not every book is like that, right? Like there are Sophie's Choice books out there, which I think are outliers because that is a massive trauma. One of my girlfriends just watched The Boy in the Striped Pajamas last night and she really thought that it would be a sweet friendship story. I was like, oh no, the ending of that is not, it's very traumatic. She's like, I'm sobbing. I didn't know it was gonna be like that. I'm like, should have asked me. I would have given you a massive trigger warning for that movie because that's a tough movie to watch. But that's an outlier, right? There's plenty of others that don't necessarily have that in there. So you don't have to write a Sophie's Choice to write a really compelling book. You just have to write somebody that is really relatable. If you look at Kennedy Ryan's book, Before I Let Go, it is a New York Times, USA Today, everything else bestseller. Part of that has been helped by all the publicity that she has gotten, but I've read her book since the beginning, and she is a really, really good writer. There is trauma in this one because I'm not giving anything away because there's a trigger warning on the first page, but there's a stillbirth. And so it's massively traumatic for her, but it doesn't happen on the page. It happened in the past. So the character's issues are all coming from what came after the stillbirth between them. So she doesn't have it all there. She doesn't make the mother make a Sophie's Choice in the labor and delivery room, which is good because that I wouldn't have wanted to read either. So you can totally do it. You just got to find the balance between the two and what makes you happy. Yeah.
Do you think that there's that related to the question is whether you show the trauma in great detail
Mhm.
or whether you just hint at it?
Right. So yeah, whether you show the trauma in great detail or you hint at it. So I actually have a video where I analyze a scene from The Family Upstairs, Lisa Jewell's The Family Upstairs. And I do put a trigger warning in it because I don't want to be canceled on the internet, right? But she is actually remembering the domestic violence and not in huge detail, but enough that you know that that husband that she's going to visit is not a good person and she's in danger. So you're worried about her, but nothing happens physically to her. He doesn't do anything physical in that. It's just a memory as she's going by these places. And that scene analysis video that I have is really good because it talks about how she sees something, it triggers a memory, it triggers her reaction in her dialogue. You can literally see the step-by-step in that particular scene that I analyzed. So you don't have to put it on the page. I personally don't want to read about a violent sexual assault on the page. Other people, maybe that's okay for them. I would rather just read about the emotional aftermath, you know. So. Any other questions about the other one or anything else?
I like what you said about the rule of 6. I think I've heard that talk a long time ago. And you do with families, and you do 6 things about their parents, 6 things about their childhood.
I actually confused 2 of my classes when I said that because I don't know, I didn't sleep enough, but so I do a brain map, which is where I do these spokes where I figure out all of their things. But when I have, you know, like I figure out their family, I figure out their romantic history, I figure out their friends, I figure out all these key elements. And I do not have my brain map class up anywhere right now. Eventually I want to offer it on the channel in my spare time. But when I have something key in the plot, like some kind of a key moment in the character's history, I will do the rule of 6 of like impact or motivations, depending on what it is. If it's something the character did, then I want to know his 6 motivations. Why did he rob that store when he was 7? You know, what were his 6 motivations for that? And then you can really get deeper with the character on that and get to know them. I think one of our big complaints about For All Mankind is what the characters are doing in season 3. I don't think we'll get to 4. Makes no sense whatsoever. Like they have no motivation for it. In the first season, I did relate to them because they had good motivation, but now I don't care. And so that's why none of us, I think, are going to get through season 4. So when you drop that ball of deep emotional motivations and deep emotional wounds, the readers check out, they move on to something else.
What by doing your brain maths and all, you know all your characters.
Yeah.
Earlier, so that's why you could just write it after you know.
Yes. Because I do it for the big books, right? Because these ones are so much more complex than the category. Category is 50,000 words. It's not as complex. It's really only the hero and heroine. So I don't have to know that much. Sounds like I'm skating, but you don't really have to know as much in depth as you do with a single title. These have a higher bar to reach. They're usually interconnected. So when I do all that, I've really got to kind of plan it a little bit better. But yeah, that's what I do. Do we want to draw some names for the 3 books in the? Anybody can take these little coffee things. Don't tell my cover designer. And thank you for everybody that came on the Zoom. So, yes. Oh, there we go. We're gonna do. So, and if you don't want my art, I will not be offended. You can give it to somebody else. That's okay. I will not be offended. Isaac. So right away, poor guy. He's like,
And Leah, which Leah?
L.I. Sorry, Elliot. Any other questions?
Yeah, very much enjoy it.
You're welcome. All right. I think the Zoom people, I'm good. So you can do whatever you guys do at the end for the Zoom people. Okay.
I want to thank Ms. Junk for that great presentation. We have a gift for her,
Thank you.
her appreciation.
Love bluebirds. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I love that. I love bluebirds too. Nice. Thank you.
All right. There was a book and a movie that I saw some years ago, maybe some decades ago. A lot of trauma, a lot of romance. It was called Love Story. I don't know if any of you guys ever heard of that, but starred Ryan O'Neal in the movie. I can't remember who the female was, but they were like college students and they fell in love and she developed cancer, I believe. And his main problem was with his wealthy father. They didn't have a good relationship, but at some point in her illness, he had to go to his to his father and ask for money. And it was just the hardest thing, to see between two people, father and son that didn't get along, but one needed the other. It was a good story. I read the book too. All right. Any other? All right. Remember, next month we do this by Zoom. Am I correct?
Yes.
All right. Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. We have Ann who wants to present something to the group.